go door to door, which is what legislative candidates political candidates of all kinds do. And many parks have no soliciting rules, and that would include legislative candidates, which Representative Neron is troubled by. I mean, a park resident could invite a legislative candidate in, but the legislative candidate can't come in otherwise if the park has a no soliciting rule. So Rep Neron is interested in that issue. Representative Marsh is further along. She's interested in rent increases in parks and marinas. She's interested in landlords requiring aesthetic repairs as opposed to maintenance and disrepair fixes, but aesthetic repairs, such as she's got a park in her district where the landlord has said that if you sell your home, your horizontal siding needs to be vertical, or your windows need to be a different style. And those often have significant cost impacts. So she's interested in that issue. She's also interested in a park in her district where the landlord is requiring a tenant who's selling her home to get a private inspection of the interior of the home. The interior of manufactured homes or floating homes are the responsibility of the tenant, not of the landlord. The landlord's responsibility is for the exterior, or the rights of the landlords to the exterior, but Marcia's interested in that issue. Let's see what, and Marcia's also interested in looking at extending the program that Samantha works for, which sunsets at the end of 25, I think. And if you're going to extend that, you would probably want to do that in the 24 session. I can't, maybe it's at the end of 26. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Marcia's also looking at that. I'm not hearing about any other, well, I do hear about other things, but I'm not hearing about anything that seems serious at this point. Questions? One other legislative note, it appears to me that that Alexandra is gone, has left HCS and gone to the League of Oregon Cities. So that means that she's not the lobbyist for the department following these issues.
No, that's helpful. Any action points or anything? There's Heather. Great. I'm going to pause real quick and say we are at quorum, so we are now in an official meeting. Thank you, Heather, for joining us. You know, we were at that 50%, and we have had conversation and just talking about the dispute resolution advisory committee report going to the legislative, and John was just giving a legislative update. So we have not done minutes yet. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry I cut you off. Anything else on the report? If not, we can circle back to the minutes from our last July meeting, if people get a chance to review those, and any comments, corrections. John shared that he was not at a lot of the meetings and didn't have anything, and I had just asked about shortening up to bullet points, and it sounds like we'll do that for the future meetings versus the copy of the transcription. Any other additions or corrections people have? Angela saying no.
I have a question in the minutes.
Yes.
There was a, John was talking about funding. It's on page 3. It's right above number 5, where he was concerned about funding. he wanted to make sure that there was funding, that we don't lose MCRC, but he wasn't certain about the funding. He said Rick had assured him there was enough money. I think Rick thought that I was asking whether there was enough money to continue Samantha's position. And that's not what I was asking, because I had heard from a number of HCS people over the last 2 years that there wasn't enough money to support the base program of MCRC. Rick has assured me recently that is not the case, that there is enough money without asking for general fund money. But I do want to make sure that is accurate. So it seems like a question hanging out there. I'm curious too.
Yeah, there's the funding's there for the program to continue on. Now, if Representative Neron wants to increase, if she's talking about increasing, that would be, then we would look at trying to increase fees in order to do that. Although I think over time, if we are going to, there's some discussion about, and we're going to get into this a little bit further in the meeting because we're going back to the old original grants that we started with the last biennium. We had so many different grants coming out to the mediation centers that now we're finally going back to the regular funding that it's getting, prices aren't going down, everything's going up. So the thought process would be to possibly look at increasing these things, but that would be in the future to see what the possibilities are. Then we'd also then look at looking at increasing fees if that's what we're going to do, and that would be a discussion that we'd probably have to have, only because as costs start to increase, we're going to have to address that at some point in time. So John had a good point. At this time, just to kind of answer the question, we're fine with the funding, but if we're looking at maybe increasing with another attorney down the line, we need to start talking about it now, if that's what's going to happen. Because we ended up when Rep. Neron contacted us, we went ahead and moved that over to our public affairs people to go ahead and address, and so they're having their conversations. But if this moves forward and continues on, then we'll have to look at addressing increasing fees. But right now, as it stands, we're fine.
Yeah, and I guess the question would be, Rick, are you asking for an amendment or correction to the minutes in that section, meaning that's what we're discussing if we're approving the minutes?
I don't know if we need to, if that was a question, I guess we would say that the funding's fine, I guess, if that's what you're asking.
Well, what I was asking is if you wanted anything revised in the minutes before we approve them.
No, that's fine. We're good for right now. Yeah, because this conversation just came up, like, I want to say last week. So that wouldn't have been a conversation that we would have had in July.
Okay.
So let me give a little more background, Pat. Rep. Neron staff told me that she had contacted Rick to ask whether there was enough money to do a second Samantha. I have asked Rick about the status of the funding, and Rick has told me that he can't tell me the actual data because I don't know why, but that I would have to do a Freedom of Information request to get that. I've not done that. I am working with Representative Marsh, and there may be a formal request through Representative Marsh to the department to see if we can get that. The history of the fund is that it's a special assessment on tenants. And it was created in 1989 at the request of the Oregon State Tenants Association. So the tenants asked for it. They asked to be taxed. They're taxed once a year with their property taxes. It initially was $3 a year. And it was done so that we could expand the services that MMCRC offers to both tenants and landlords. Later, I can't remember when, sometime in the 2000s, we added a fee for landlords annual fee to support MMCRC's work in monitoring their performance with the mandatory education requirements. And I think that's $100 for larger parks and $50 for parks of 25 spaces or less. And of course, we've added, thanks to Angela, we've added marinas to both of those things. The tenants supported an increase in the $3 special assessment to $7, and I can't remember when that was, maybe late 1990s. And then again in the early 2000s, it increased to $10. So if there were a desire by the legislature to expand, to do either of two things, one, to continue Samantha's position, I think that would probably also require some figuring out whether the money is adequate, because the initial intention with the position that Samantha Hill fills, it's not hers, was that we had enough money in the department's fund for $100,000 for 4 years. There was a delay in starting the program for about a year and a half. So Marsh had a bill a couple of years ago that extended that 4-year period. So we're still in the 4-year period. But if we were to extend it beyond the 4-year period, we'd have to look at, which is why I keep asking for what the status of the fund is. And if you were to add a second lawyer, you would need to, you'd probably also need to do that. I've discussed this with the OSTA board. The OSTA board is aware that there may be a request to increase the $10 special assessment to something like 12. I haven't done any data analysis to figure out whether that's enough, but that's the background, Pat, of what's going on here. Happy to answer any questions. I would also say the section of the minutes I think is accurate.
Great. So I'm going to ask that we take a pause and have a motion to approve the minutes. The one correction I see is we don't have Bill Miner as a member, and that actually, from what I'm hearing, Samantha is not a member, and currently she's listed under a member category. And with that, is there a motion for approval of the July 10th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second?
I second. Angela seconds.
Pat beat you doing that. So all in favor, aye, or raising of a hand? And the minutes of the July 10th meeting with the correction of those in attendance is approved. Thank you all. Rick, do you want to, being that a lot of the conversation over the last couple moments here has been tied to funding, jump to the grant application and process, and you were hinting and there was some conversation around that agenda item?
Yeah, we're with the new item coming up, we're starting to look at, and again, the contracts and what's possible. I want to, I've started looking at, what are, as far as the amounts of the different grants, and more than likely what I'm going to start doing is just contacting each CDRC and talking about the amounts and what's appropriate. I think we're going to probably stay, I won't say think, I believe we'll stay with the remain the same with the purpose as operational as opposed to mediation costs. I think it's helpful so that CDRCs don't get stuck with additional monies, because it only can be used for mediation, which stopped a lot of usage of the funds. So I think we'll stay with that process or that purpose, but it's more in addressing the amounts and seeing what we can do as far as either shifting amounts around or raising some amounts depending on what based on the conversations I'll have with the different CDRCs. But I'm looking at that, and we'll get everything. We'll start preparing everything and having those discussions so that and just start getting those grants ready. So So, and then working with our procurement department to just get that going again. It's, and again, moving back to the, getting away from the special grants that we had and getting back to, we'll say, just for lack of a better term, business as usual when it comes to the grants, and moving away from these special fundings that we had. So, and that work is just starting, with our registrations starting all, we're just starting to touch on that for the most part.
Yeah, and with that, would encourage you to definitely loop and include Patrick in that conversations, because in the Tri-County area, there's been changes.
Yeah.
Because the area, the city of Gresham is no longer going to
Right.
be continuing their program, and that's transitioning.
Right.
There has been information that Resolutions Northwest may be coming back and requesting grants. And then in Southern Oregon, Douglas County which was Common Ground is no longer there.
Right.
And a few others that are listed. And actually Yam Hill is not there. Is that correct, Heather? Because you guys are. I thought I saw a nod. You're on mute. Yep. And so there's definitely some changes as far as the number of centers and who is active, and there may be some newer ones who are temporarily providing services in the Tri-County area. One is the Washington-based group who is now filling that piece, longstanding community center there across the river.
And Tillamook County is
Right.
getting a new CDRC.
And that,
Heather, was that Tillamook County?
Tillamook County is getting a new CDRC as well.
Thank you.
and that. Anything else to add, Rick, as far as that agenda item, the plans and strategies for the CDRC
No.
grant?
No, I think you brought up a good point, is in getting together with Patrick and more than likely set up a meeting with all the CRCs just to see what's on the table at this point.
That. And so that brings it to you, Ken. You have two agenda items. You have the data reporting.
Well, let me get Stephen on the line.
And if he's not available, you have your other agenda item, which was the revisions to the mandatory piece.
While he's getting his other party on the line, I just want to apologize. I've had these meetings for some reason on 10:30 and I thought I was early. So my apologies to all of you. Forgive me.
We're happy you're
No.
here.
Glad to
Yeah.
make- I just thought I was early.
I gave him a shout. I mean, I'll type him another message.
I'm here now.
Oh, are you there now?
Yeah.
Terrific. Okay.
All right.
So if I don't know whether or not everyone's got a copy of the report, or Judy, do you want to put it up and share it, or does everyone have a copy?
I would love to share it. Which report are we talking about this time?
The
Is it the-
summary report. The grantee summary report?
Got it. Give me a moment and I'll pull it up.
Okay. And then Stephen, as soon as it's up, the floor is yours.
All right. I'm gonna share my screen then. Ta-da. Should be able to do that. Okay.
There it is.
All right. So for the last quarter, Didn't get that much info in. Only got data from the usual suspects, neighbor to neighbor, Results Center for Dispute Resolution and Restorative Justice. And I think we got a few from Community Solutions Central Oregon. So the trends are the same. Where's it at? Having most of the cases resolved in a complete agreement. Is it showing that? We had 28 total participants using 18 survey. Most of it this time around was initiated by managers and where's that? And most of them were court connected services, and that's mostly due to a lot of the case coming from Results Center for Dispute Resolution. What else is interesting to happen? Got okay. The one thing that I want to point out at this meeting, and I have a question that I want to pose to the group, is that in the surveys, we ask a question where we ask, is the mediation session either mandatory or voluntary? At this point, you can see that the proportion states that most of it is voluntary, but we had 28 participants, but you can see that only 13 answered the question. So the problem that we're running into for this particular question, I think that for let's bring this up, show the raw data here. For cases that are court connected, we're not specifying if it's mandatory or voluntary. So the question that I have, I think this mostly probably concerns I want to say Brian, but whoever represent Resolve Center.
Yeah.
Would it be a fair assumption to say that if it's court connected, to say that it's a mandatory mediation session?
Actually, no, because by statute, the FED is exempt from the mandatory mediation statute.
So
That's why they're blank in that yes, the judge is saying if they appear at their first appearance, they have to do mediation, but that is not the goal. The goal is of the mandatory is tied to the statutory piece of.
Okay. I could put voluntary then. Could we do voluntary?
I think it's better not, and that's why I usually mark NA because it doesn't apply to that, and that's where we also pulled off the court connected data out separately because it was waiting.
Got it. All right.
So
yeah.
is that question, could that generate more intended correct answers if there was a definition included for that checkoff piece, or?
That was my opinion, but I think it seems like everyone is aware that court-connected cases are somewhat its own thing. So as long as when I present that, hey, most of our cases are mandatory or voluntary, and the folks that do decline cases, it's usually they're in a separate program, for example, in the court-connected mediation session. So as long as everyone is aware of that nuance to that data, I think we should be fine. And then for the rest of the quarter, no mandatory mediation sessions were declined. So the rate is still the same, still pretty low. So overall, the program is doing well. Well, that's my assessment.
Yeah.
Subjective assessment. But yes, and hopefully everyone, when you have the time, can check out the report itself. You can see it by the colony totals. Also, the court connected, see what's happening, the resolution of court connected mediation sessions, and of course the floating home marinas, and the last yearly breakdown of the demographic information. I guess one more thing I would like to ask for me is that if you're having difficulties with actually accessing the link, just let me know. So I know sometimes Qualtrics can be funny. And yeah, that's it on my end. Ken?
Well,
And
yeah,
what I jump in there real quick is your
Hmm.
comment about creating a instruction piece. I think that would be real helpful, especially as folks change. And if someone new comes in, they wouldn't know that definition. So I think if there was a somewhere that was disputed, shared that, yep, this is how you do this part, this is how you do this section, would be helpful for centers and the longevity of the data and pieces. Because yes, I know it, but if I
Mhm.
left tomorrow, the next person would probably not know those things. So would encourage the creation of those definitions and a little how-to.
It's an excellent idea. Yeah. I think I could do that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Ken?
Sure. I think I want to revisit this idea of court-ordered mediations, because part of what my understanding is that the legislature is looking to see how well the mandatory mediation aspect is working, and we get a distorted picture, especially Resolve is so dominant in the numbers when you really get down to it. And maybe we can figure out a way to accommodate that somehow or other, but it doesn't give a clear picture, in my estimation, of how well mandatory mediation is being accepted. And maybe I'm looking at it, too severely. I don't know, but I think we need to clarify that somehow, and break out the court awarded instructed mediations so that we get a clearer picture of what's been done mandatorily versus voluntarily. Because the way these numbers look right now is that if you look at the numbers, we're saying voluntary was 70% of people that initiated, and 31% were mandatory. I think that's mandatory or voluntary. Is that really accurate when I think we have to pull out those numbers from court initiated somehow or other so that we give a better picture. I don't believe, other than Brian, that there's anyone else that's got a contract with the courts. And, I'm fine with letting it go as is, but I think if we're ever pressed on it, people should understand that.
So.
No, I,
Can I
Can we
ask? Right,
clarify?
okay.
John, you have a comment?
Well, I was going to ask where are any sense of where those those voluntary, not voluntary cases are coming from? Are they coming from one particular area?
Well, yeah, they're primarily the court awarded mediations come from Resolve.
he's asking about the other cases.
No, I'm asking about those. Are they mostly from your organization, Brian?
Yeah, that's why I had encouraged they be broken out and tracked separately, because the
No, I
Court
get it.
Connected is, there's 264 cases when you look at that Court Connected tab.
Okay,
No,
so
go ahead,
I have
Pat.
a question. So, this is just trying to understand the court order. When I've gone to court, let's say an FDD is a really good example, but not just an FDD. And the judge wants to know who can mediate, or can you go in the hall and solve this among yourselves? Which is, either one of those is fine. Do you need a translator? So that's very, it's a very relaxed kind of thing, sort of. I mean, it's FED court, but you make a choice about going in the hall and talking, and sometimes you choose that option because you've got one mediator and somebody else is using them, and you're looking at time. Because if people are there, they're probably there for work. So I don't know how those things get counted, because that little thing in the hallway where I'm there with the tenant and maybe a translator, what is that? Because it's, I mean, we've gone all the way from Par Acres into court because we didn't resolve it in Par Acres. But, you know, there's the thing about being in a courthouse, which makes it much more serious. Yeah, people tend to step up. I consider it kind of a come to Jesus moment. Anyway, so maybe that's not mediation, which I can totally understand, not having a mediator there. But then there's where people have chosen to go to mediation from an FED, as suggested by the judge. So then does that get reported?
But
Well,
you're
that's
muted, Heather. Heather can address it because she works in the Marion Circuit Courts as their CDRC.
Yeah.
So we have not captured, like, if you're there, I don't know about it. I don't know that our mediator that's there knows. Often we're sitting there and the property address for what kind of property it is doesn't come out till well into it, and you're back in front of the judge before we can get there. So if you actually go in and you sign a consent to mediate, then that would be reported in our court related, but we have not taken anything from court related and divided it up into property types or kinds.
And for us, this Jackson County, the Circuit Court, it is required to do formal mediation, and that is through a contract we do have with the center. And it actually calls out manufactured cases separately, because so we don't have a double dipping situation as far as funding. And so our contract explicits that we record and track those separately and differently if it is, and we just find them by the filing name as well as the address and those pieces, and that's why they get recorded here. And I think there's a lot of importance relevance, because I actually see a lot of cases that, in my non-legal opinion, would say should have participated in mandatory mediation, and that the tenant would theoretically have a defense the way the statute is, but there's a lack of awareness of the mandatory mediation. And if you look, there's a large percentage that were rule violations and maintenance and neighbor issues versus unpaid rent when you add those three together.
Yeah. I think people, tenants would be more inclined to do mediation if they're in the courthouse. And I don't mind doing that, but you have one mediator generally, and it's a time thing. And I know the tenants are under a time crunch. And so we'll do it in the hallway. And, we generally work it out okay. But I've done, as Heather knows, a lot of mediation. So I know how to, not that I'm mediating, but I know how to talk.
Well,
John,
yeah,
has
this is
his
a
hand up,
nuanced part of what we're trying to measure and give an accurate term. And I get your point, Brian, that some of the things should rise to a, there's Bill Miner. some of the issues should or would have risen to mandatory mediation. And we're just haven't decided on how to determine that, or if you want to, if you think it's necessary. But I guess I'm looking for an accurate accounting of how well we're doing with this aspect of the legislation for mandatory mediation. And I don't think the legislators really understand the business of court, demanded or court directed mediations. Is kind of up to us to help them understand that. If you think it's too nuanced, we'll let it go. But that's something maybe we can take it offline and discuss it a little bit further. But that's my take on it right now, is that we do need to discuss this aspect of it. And maybe that means that somehow or other, you guys are designating within your own reporting, which is mandatory, which is how many were mandatory, how many were likely voluntary.
Well, and that's where, like I said, the court is a whole different beast on that. But I think it's an important point that I'd like some clarity on is if something is mandatory mediation by the statute, it's mandatory mediation. And what I've been getting a sense is there's some confusion that it could be a mandatory criteria by statute, and suddenly, oh, the parties are agreeing to it, so it's no longer mandatory. And I think there's one of our places that there's some confusion. If it is one or the other, would defer to John and Bill on their thoughts.
So I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I wouldn't spend any more time with the department trying to get any clearer about this. It's a legislator's not going to care about these nuances. What they're going to care about is somebody using mediation. If they are, great. Legislators, just like judges, like to see the parties resolve their dispute without having to make the decision for them. There's a fine line between a judge suggesting that you go out in the hallway and mediate and a judge ordering that. Few lawyers, and hopefully few parties, are dumb enough to ignore a judge's suggestion, encouragement that you go mediate. Some are that dumb, but most are not. I mean, getting into that nuance in your report is beyond, I think, beyond what you need to be telling the legislature. For example, I noticed that almost half of these were involved non-payment. Well, mandatory mediation doesn't apply to non-payment.
No.
So, I mean, we could put footnotes on this for several pages to do that. But I think the main point that the legislature wants to see is this program being used? Yes.
Okay, no, if everyone's comfortable with that, we'll let it stand.
Thanks for that.
Did Heather still have a question?
I didn't. I was going to comment to the court, more to the court related, but I think we beat the dog. Sorry, that's not a nice thing to do, but.
I also wanted to say Pat hit the nail on the head. It's a come to Jesus moment for especially for a lot of tenants. And probably one of the reasons why so many of these were initiated by the manager as opposed to the tenant is because they were in FED court.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers that. With that, I will, I guess we want to talk about the non-conforming to mediation form that we've sent out and had some discussion on, or I reissued it several weeks ago. Again, I don't know whether you have a copy of that, Judy, or not. But I can try to share it.
I
I can bring up a copy.
Thank you.
I've got a copy. Let me see if I can share the darn thing.
And for Bill, who's newer to the group, the goal of this was to create some sort of document so that if someone did participate in a mandatory mediation and it proceeded to an FED case and it was raised as a potential defense, that there was some sort of unified documentation that could be submitted to a court to help show that yes, there was mediation, or no, there wasn't. That was within the mandatory pre-filing criteria.
My screen is sharing, but I don't see it even on mine. Let's see.
It's there.
Are you guys seeing it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, well-
it's actually looks like a case from June 14th, East County resolutions.
Yeah, okay. I actually don't see it on my screen, so thank you for that. But it's a fill-in form. It's pretty straightforward, and you can see the information that's requested on it. And this is a document, as Brian was saying, that it would give an individual evidence, basically, that a mediation, wasn't adhered to in a normal fashion. And there are 3 different options where the landlord or tenant complies with the rental agreement or with provisions of Chapter 90, landlord or tenant conducted within the facility, or the modification of a landlord rule or regulation. And then it lets you know who responded and who basically didn't, was reluctant to respond or wasn't able to be reached, etc. And we basically turn this around and send a copy of this to both parties, to the landlord and the tenants. And even if they had supporting people with them, they would be copied as well. And of course, the CDRC would get a copy of it. It's designed basically to bring attention to the event and not wait until the CDRC goes through their normal reporting cycle. So we get that information, and we're asking that once you discern that there's a non-conformance in the process, that you notify us within 5 days, basically. You send an email, this form to me, and then that's basically it. That's a simple form that goes out and lets everyone know that, there was, a non-conforming instance. And our letter reads non-compliance, basically, not non-conformance. So is that terribly clarifying, or?
Yeah, I guess.
Bill's got a question.
I guess, yeah, that is right. As a mediator, I would say, is it non-partial if you send out letters? Do you send out letters as well saying someone did participate in mandatory mediation? So they have that
No, it's non-conforming, non-compliance. So, Bill, do you have an issue?
Yeah, I think, non-conforming I see as could be used as Exhibit 1 and as a per se violation of the statute. And so I think that for OHCS to kind of jump to the conclusion of non-performance, that would be the troubling part from my perspective. I think an opportunity, because again, we don't know what happened, why somebody didn't get respond, whether the notice was correct, whether they were, calling a different number or something like that. So I think I understand the purpose of this is just for reporting purposes and not for kind of deciding whether somebody is or isn't in violation of the statute. And I can't see the whole form, but I don't know if at the bottom there's an opportunity for somebody to maybe send an email to say, if you disagree with this, please respond. But it just seems kind of seems like a report that is potentially definitive. And if it's inaccurate, that could be problematic.
Yeah, so me as a manager, I look at it and the person couldn't be reached. And I think, I can reach all of my tenants. So how could the person not, if you're just calling and they don't answer? I mean, maybe the person's in the hospital. I don't know. But in general, with something like this, I would be persistent to reach them, even if all they wanted to do was say, we don't want to do it anymore, which would be fine with me. That would be okay. But I wouldn't like to check that box that the person couldn't be reached, because for me, it would be, it's suggestive of how hard did you try?
Well, landlords, the statute requires people be notified and scheduled within 30 days.
Yes.
So usually, there's been some nominal, more than a nominal amount of effort to try to track people down. And that's what has been a difficulty for some CDRCs. It's simple as that, because in essence, we don't always have all the accurate information on who is the contact within a park. Residents or park managers now, not all of them, many do not give us that information in terms of an email address and a phone number, which leads to difficulty tracking down the right parties for CDRCs. So I don't think it's a testament or a defining document. I think it's more matter of fact. And if the CDRC can't track down, a responsible party, what are tenants doing on a day-to-day basis? So, I mean, that was the thinking behind it. Pat?
Heather's ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Heather?
So, Bill, I don't know if you know this, in our previous discussion, a lot of this was set up by a decision that the CDRCs have made to do 3 attempts. And so at least in our center, we would say, this is the party we attempted and the date of the initial contact, whether it was mail, phone, or email, and then the second contact attempt, third contact attempt, and how those were done. And that I always tell our people, it shouldn't be the same contact on all of those attempts, that there would be another attempt in some manner or form to reach them. And then it goes through multiple parties. So sometimes we reach out and get a manager, but they're not going to be a party that wants or can make a decision of the nature that is in the dispute. So we're looking for another party, and then we reach out and do multiple. So there's a lot of work on our end, but we did agree that we would make 3 attempts as kind of our best practice. And that came out of these meetings, and then went to our training at the centers.
Okay. Okay, Pat,
So when I look at an initiating party that in this case looks like a resident, I would be invested in wanting that resident to have mediation if that's what that person really wants. And so Heather has gotten back to me, or other mediators, and said we couldn't get the person at this address, or And sometimes people don't have emails. And I've gone and I've given, so initially I've given what I have. But if that doesn't work, then I go to the house and I explain that the mediator is trying to get a hold of them, but is unable to. And we've had this conversation before where I've had people who literally didn't understand what was going on. And they were Spanish speaking, first language Spanish speaking. Heather and I've talked about that. So I do my best to explain what's going on and why the information is needed. And only one time have I had somebody say no. We ended up in court, and then we ended up in the hallway talking about it. And they were like, they didn't want to be there. And they just didn't understand what was going on. Even when I thought the explanation had been more than once inadequate, and I was wrong about that.
Can you scroll down a little bit more again, Ken, on the request?
Yeah, and while Ken's doing that, the goal of this form started actually back in the beginning of the program, in that, being that within the statute, it infers there's potential defenses, to not doing this, is that the request of the committee to the MMCR was to create some sort of documentation so all parties would have something they could provide to a court if it ever became a question and was raised. And that's as much for the housing provider who says, yes, I tried and they didn't reply, so that they would be able to show that in an objective way that hopefully could be entered into evidence. And that was the original purpose of trying that, or showing, yep, we did this hoop and we didn't have an agreement, and that's why we're here now, was the goal of original one. And this has gone around in lots of different iterations and still hasn't landed multiple years later. And that's, as the chairperson, just, there's been times and trying to get that buttoned up, because it was one of the issues within the program. There was a lack of documentation that was provided. The reason we asked for it to come from the housing is that we felt that was more objective than from a center itself. That's the whole backstory for your information, Bill.
Okay, I'm going to do this really quick. So for the mediation request was closed for the following reason, and responding party could not be reached. And Heather talks about how at Neighbor to Neighbor, they make 3 efforts. And, this, we do not know how many efforts were made, but it might be, and maybe this is too much, it might be nice to have boxes under this first one that indicate other attempts and the date. But maybe that's just, getting too, I don't know, picky.
Well, typically these should happen, and this was a case that lingered on for a long while. So typically all of this is, covered in 2 or 3 days. So it shouldn't have, this one should have never gone on that long. But that was that's immaterial to what the intent of it is to give both parties something that they can take to court and say, yes, we did attempt to mediate.
And I guess, Ken, what I'm pushing back on is, I think it is equally as important for you to provide them documentation that they did mediate and comply with it versus just not comply. That it's balanced.
Well, if they did comply, doesn't mean that they had to agree, and the parties could still wind up in court.
Right. So I'm not saying that there was an outcome and that there was a resolution, that they met the statutory requirement of participating, and that's all. Yeah, a lot of it could be non-agreements, but they participated because no one is obligated to have a resolution within mediation and it was to have that.
Well, I think you look at the numbers and it's safe to say that, excuse me, most parties do agree. Very low percentage from the numbers that we looked at. I think it's probably between 7 and 3% decline or reject. So to assume that people are going to follow the statute and operate in good faith, I think is a little bit much overkill, and we want to draw focus to those that don't operate in good faith. Because everybody's operating in good faith, the likelihood of going to court is, much more minimal. Bill, you have an issue?
Yeah, and Rick has his hand up too.
Yeah, I was just going to my previous comment. I mean, I think that the document itself is likely, it's hearsay. It's likely inadmissible. Kind of what OHCS is doing if this were ever to be an issue, if it was being used to prosecute a counterclaim under the statute, and so your team would likely have to, be hauled into court to testify. And maybe, I don't know if JVL agrees with me or not on that, but so just to color my previous comments, the only thing what I would suggest maybe to add to make this better is a box at the bottom of saying the mediation request was closed, and adding a box that says doesn't qualify. Because I know that there's been plenty of mediations that once we get into the facts, say, okay, this is actually an attempt to talk about rent. And this isn't really a landlord-tenant compliance with the rental agreement, that sort of thing, even though it was raised that way. And so it was actually closed because it doesn't qualify under the statute. So if you're going to use it, you might want to add that little that box at the end. And again, I would encourage you to add something of if you disagree with this, let our office know or something like that.
Can do. Take that as a amendment to the document.
So can I jump in just to respond to Bill, the point Bill's raised? The lack of clarity, I think, has to do with when is mediation initiated. And that's I wrote the damn statute, although Bill got to amend it in the negotiations. So it's equally his fault. But when is mediation initiated? Is it initiated when one party asks for it, or is it initiated when the second party responds? So this box that we're spending time talking about is saying that the responding party apparently could not be reached. So the penalty that I think Bill is being careful to think about is 1 month's rent, or that the issue is waived if it's a landlord trying to enforce a rule, for example. But in both cases, it has to be good faith failure to participate. And I would say, if I were Bill, I would say that if you didn't contact me, if I wasn't, quote, reached, then I didn't fail to participate in good faith and not in bad faith. So no penalty. But,
yes, we're getting into the legal debates.
Right. We're getting into the weeds, and lawyers love to get in the weeds. And I would just, I'd be fine with adding more boxes, but I don't know that I'd worry about this a great deal.
And I guess backing up even farther, is this documentation even something that is relevant and helpful and to it, or does it all just maybe something that is not necessary? Like I said, mine as a CDRC representative was to provide some sort of objective piece that for parties to have a reference to, versus them saying, oh, I did, and someone else saying, no, I didn't. And because as a CDRC, we're protected from testifying, and that's where it was to help and I think the short of it is, I don't think anyone has raised it yet there's no case law.
If I were a landlord, I'd emphasize that this is not a matter of me declining to participate or refusing to attend the scheduled mediation. It was that I was not reached, and that's not my fault.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we? I'm sorry, my camera's not working for some reason. If we want to scrap it, that's fine. but I don't think that's the intent. We're trying to give people some, like you said, some evidence that they went through the process in good faith. And circumstances could dictate. I mean, there are a lot of different circumstances could dictate, but you know, how are tenants, if this person can't be reached for mediation, how are tenants supposed to, you know, be served for mediation? You've got no, you know, no way of implementing or enforcing 90.767.
And I say, Rick had said,
Rick, I'm sorry, Rick. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
No worries. I was just, kind of along that line is, this report was kind of created to get information in quicker so that that everyone had an idea of what happened here. I mean, so, is this was mainly for internal for us so that we could get our report more accurate in a faster time. Now, this is strictly something that we came up with to try to provide some kind of information. This is definitely is not a mandatory document that we have to have. This is just something we created in order to try to get the information a little quicker. It sounds like we have a little maybe an issue with language, the words we're using, which, should we not be using certain words? Should the naming convention of it being, and non-conforming, should it be more of an outcome report type of thing, so that it's more creating more of an informational, this is what's happened and that's it. But again, it's for us to update our records. It doesn't go outside. We don't send this anywhere to anyone. This stays within our department just so that we can update our records. So while I see Bill's concern and John's concern, is it, considering this is our internal document, are these concerns something that, because we still have our non-compliance report that we sent out, or the letters that we sent out for non-compliance, that mediation was never resolved or even scheduled by whether it's the landlord or whoever. So we have that goes out to everyone, but this is more coming to us internally so that we can fill out reports. So my question, I guess, is if it's our internal report that mediation centers are sending to us in order to update our records quicker, is this something then is this discussion still, as critical as we're making it, I guess is what I'm saying. Because at the same time, we don't have to have this report. This thing could go away today. I'm just trying to figure out is, what's, where are we with this?
I guess that I'm hearing that very different, Rick, than that, because I thought this was what was being sent out to the parties, and the way it's structured and reads, it's very much the letter that is going to the tenants. If there is, as a grantee of something I need to be doing, I just need a clear direction that says, grantee, you need to attempt it 3 times. Here's what you need to do. And then you need to tell me that, submit this. I mean, that's very simple and clear. That, if that is what the goal is, that has not been communicated clearly to my director. And because I know as a new person, she had questions. It's like, okay, what is this?
Yeah, so this is, we still have our non-compliance letter that we send out. That's the official letter that we send out. This was
and
more
that's what's
so
on the screen, correct?
I'm sorry?
No, this is non-conformance. This is what we received from you.
And I'm seeing, as I think this is where and I think it's a naming convention that's bothering everyone, because non-compliance, non-conformance is almost the same thing. And maybe we just need to name it something else, because all this is for, is to let us know what happened within 5 days, so that we know what happened here. Other than that, it's our internal document. We don't send this out to anyone. This is ours. It's the non-compliance letter that gets sent out.
Okay,
Yeah.
so two thoughts on this. Quick, Brian, the thing, if people participate, there doesn't need to be something added to this form if this form is continued, in my opinion, because documents are produced when you have a mediation, and then I have a copy in my file, and the tenant has their copy that goes home with them. So, and then there's some documentation and neighbor to neighbor. So there's, I think, probably plenty of documentation for participation. And oh shoot, the second thing just came up. Okay, I don't remember. I will remember, but I wanted to answer that question.
No, that's helpful. And I think, Rick, you may have it, is because the way that letter has read, that form has read, it is that it was something that was being sent out to parties. And I don't know what, Heather, you've had your hand up, and so I'm gonna be quiet and let Heather talk.
Oh yeah, I know what it was.
Oh, you just remembered.
I just remember. It's when my Spanish speaking people are gone for a month, and some of them tell me, like at Christmas, we're going to be gone for a month to Mexico to spend it with our families. And sometimes they don't tell me. So then there's the whole issue of trying to reach people. That's it.
So my comment goes back to my understanding of why this form is being generated is because centers are not getting information back to you right after a case concludes. Is that okay?
No, this is just the exception where you weren't able to get people to the table.
Correct.
Basically,
Ken, I think you're sharing two different forms.
This is the non-compliance form that
You're
is
showing
basically
that one,
Brian.
and then what about the
Brian
other
was,
one?
yeah, Brian was correct. The wording is very similar. And then we have copies that go to everyone. But Brian is correct. The wording is very, very similar.
Yeah, go ahead and close that out for now, Ken, because now we're just start adding wood to the fire. And we'll just, yeah, you can stop sharing altogether. That way you're, there you go, get everybody on screen. So I'm sorry. What were you saying, Heather? I mean, I just tried to, I got a little lost.
Okay, so I understand that this is now a new process because we weren't filling out the survey, the mediator survey, fast enough. And I say we, I mean centers in general. But all of this information is provided in the survey. For my
Correct.
center, we get all of this information on the same day. We're closing it on the same day. So now we're adding an extra step on the same day, one this way and one this way with the same information. So it feels redundant, but I wonder if the problem is less about needing to be notified right away and stressing within the centers that the moment they get that disposition, whether it's unavailable or failed to participate or a mediated agreement, they get that document in a timely fashion. In ours, it's, it might come into the office today and we enter it tomorrow, but it's going to be as soon as we get that back in.
If everybody operated as efficiently as you did, Heather, I would agree. But that's not what we're being told. We're being told that people tend to bundle and wait till, a point in time in the month or the quarter rather, where they, complete all the reporting. And
Yeah,
we
if you
didn't
look
want
at,
to Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if you look at what Stephen had mentioned, that it's like you said, well, here's the report, and it's the usual suspects that are reporting. So what you have is 3 that are reporting often. And so we're just, this is not a mandatory form. It's just we're trying to get updates as quickly as we can. If this is something you don't want to fill out, I mean, like you're saying, if you're up to date on everything, there's really no reason for this form. If you're just posting everything, it's just those we have all these mediation centers and we're only getting 3 reporting, and we're just trying to get this information up to date as quickly as we can. And again, if our wording's wrong and we're confusing the issue because they're similar documents, then maybe we just have to change the way it looks. But ultimately, this is not something that, if there's a need for it, great. I mean, we just want to be able to get information faster is all it is. And so that's why it was created. It wasn't to use in the non-compliance letter is completely separate from this. This is more internally for us so that we could get these posted quicker. But again, if you're, if the mediation center is producing all this reporting quickly, then there's no need for that document. It's just more of trying to get the information just a little faster.
May I make a suggestion then that we write the non-conforming letters for the centers that are not sending in their information right away and
Sure.
save ourselves a whole lot of, and I'm not trying to get people in trouble, but my understanding was part of our grant is that we get these in and submit them right away. And so I do it because I like to be in compliance with my funding sources. So there's another way to do a non-conforming letter that might be a little bit different and possibly more effective for getting you the information quicker and regularly.
And it could be, like I said, we could change the name convention to more maybe an outcome letter. If it's going to be confusing of non-conforming, and again, even it triggers something in Bill saying, hey, this isn't, I don't like this letter. We just want to, all we want to try to do is get information, and whatever we have to name it and whatever we have to do to try to just get this information into our office. That's all we're trying to do here. And we certainly don't want to create confusion in what is, legal documentation. It's just, again, more of an internal tool for us.
And I will say that is very different information because the way it read and all that, I was totally seeing it as something that was being sent to parties, and you were basically asking me to fill out your letter you were going to send. The only subtle nuance that came clear today was the non-conforming versus non-compliance. It was like, besides that, the verbiage of the whole letter is identical, and so
Yeah.
it sounds like it's going to somebody, not that we're reporting. And
Well, the whole idea of us sending the letter was the fact that the CDRCs did not want to send that kind of a letter, period. That's the crux of it. That's how we got involved in it. Now, if you're saying that we should be more strict or demanding on getting response out of the CDRCs, I guess we can say that. But, there's
contracting, you give us money. So it's pretty simple,
Well,
pretty cut and dry.
Well, yeah, and we're not trying to cast aspersions any, one way or the other. It's just a fact that somebody wasn't able to, be contacted, or someone chose not to comply. And initially, there were a lot of people that did not want to go to mandatory mediation. And I dare say that still continues. And the objective was to put something in the hands of a tenant and a landlord that this activity had occurred, and someone couldn't appear in court and say, well, I never got the letter. He never contacted me. I mean, that was, that's the long and short of it. But if you're saying that it's extra work and that CDRCs are willing to provide information on a much more timely basis, then that's maybe that eliminates the need for it.
I think
I
we
mean,
can do
I-
both. I think we can, sorry.
No, we didn't create this, this was done at the, urging of CDRCs.
Well, and I don't want to get the two mixed up because they are two different things.
Yes,
Of our compliance in a grant versus giving some sort of documentation to people who ask for a mediation so that there's closure. Those are two different pieces.
Yeah.
In that. So with it, I know we've spent a lot of time on this, and I don't know if it's been helpful or not, but definitely want to kind of move on and wrap up because I know we have the committee membership on geography and other one. And yes, Heather.
Maybe it's an action item. Maybe it's I make a motion that that I go back to the centers and do an encouragement to be in compliance with grants, and give them a heads up that it's showing up on reports that either we don't have them or some sort of letter at the end that we had no cases, so that when it looks like there's not been reporting, we know that there was 0 cases.
well, yeah, and really, it's kind of twofold in that, and you're right, Heather, but it also affects grants, right? I mean, if you're not showing you're doing anything, why are we giving you money?
Right.
So it really is, it's going to be helpful, because how am I supposed to justify raising grants amounts if I don't have any reporting from you? So that's telling me you're really not doing anything. And so you see where my problem is, and this is why, and so it may be more communication on our part. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just table this? We'll look at our report again. We're definitely going to name it differently and figure that out, and then possibly maybe change the look of it so it doesn't look like the same report, so that, Brian, you're looking and say, hey, wait a minute, it's the same thing as the other thing. So maybe slightly different, and then we'll send it to the mediation centers that aren't sending us any reports. That way it won't be confusing to those who are complying with what we're asking. Sound okay?
Yeah, because the whole original goal was to give them an alternative to Qualtrics data entry.
Yes.
Was the whole piece, and it was that simple.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. On the membership piece, it was just that one of us looking at our membership and other participants. One of the ones is we are a little thin on participation from marinas, and that being that Angela is in the role as OSTA, not in her piece, and was wanting to put it out in that reminder and encouragement for people, if you know or have other professional connections, we are definitely looking for that, because it is the membership is supposed to be diverse across the state, as well as the making sure we have representation for everybody. And Bill was kind enough to give in to help at least get the owner manager side a little more representative at the tables, because right now we're still heavy on the CDRCs and not a lot of other category. And with that, our January meeting would technically be the day. Oh, yes, Pat.
Okay, so I have the fall conference schedule. Heather, I'm so sad because I thought I was going to see you at fall conference. And I even sent something to Chuck with that suggestion. And of course, it's, with all due respect to John and Bill, it's a lot of you guys, where I really think it isn't that I don't want to hear from attorneys or business guys, but at Heather's level, it is like the bottom level of working in mediation. you know, it's the doing of it with the tenants and of course with a landlord manager. And I just think we don't, I know, because I've gone to fall conference for 20 years now. I know we don't.
Can you add the part of what the fall conference is, what the group is? Because I'm not.
I'm sorry, it's MHCO's fall conference, Manufactured Housing Communities of Oregon, their fall conference. And I just think that it's not, it could be more helpful for landlords and owners to understand this whole thing, to have it more from the level at Heather's level. Anyway, it's my bugaboo, and there I've said it and I'm done.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think outreach and getting the word out there has been something this group has wrestled with. And from what you're sharing, it doesn't sound like MMCR is there as a table or either, if I'm understanding, or are you talking about speakers, presenters?
Yeah, the presenters, there's none this year. And I know if I talk to Chuck, he'll say, well, we've had them in the past. Well, yes, but you know, it tends to be, with all due respect, tends to be attorneys doing that presenting. Not that they don't do mediation. I understand that, but I'm saying that at Heather's level, it's a whole different level than having an attorney.
Yeah, and I see John has his hand up.
I'm deeply offended. No, I'm just joking. I haven't attended the Chuck conference in a long time. I think I'm probably not welcome there, which is fine by me. And that's not why I raised my hand, even though it's in my town. I didn't raise my hand for that. I raised my hand to we're talking about committee membership, and I just want to start the staff to think about the fact that I'm planning to retire June 30.
Oh. Well, I'm a little worried about that.
My wife is going to be very happy if it actually happens.
I first got to know you, John, at the fall conference because you did come. I heard you. I attended your classes, your little seminars. Every time that you came, I found them very helpful.
Thank you.
No, then I don't know if part of that plan would be that Samantha would take on that role as the Oregon law representative, or if
I'm hoping that will be the case, but I don't make the appointments to the committee.
I would certainly be willing to put my name forward. But again, I don't know how the committee appointments work either, but yeah, we'll do our best over here to make the transition as smooth as possible. Sean Foster is also an attorney at the Lane County office who does housing. And he's kind of stepping in, kind of shadowing the manufactured housing world as well, so that we can kind of expand those resources. John has big shoes to fill, so we're going to do our best over here. But yeah, we're building our expertise, and yeah, we'll do what we can. And I'm always willing to put my name forward for what we need to fill once we lose John.
Yeah. And for that, it actually comes from Rick, is the statutory routine that it comes out of their office as far as the official appointment piece.
Yeah, and that's not a problem. I mean, we can do it now. We could do it later. On a personal, I think John's been threatening to retire. Now I see there's an official time. We'll see. I mean, I have no problem with adding Samantha, to the and appointing as a member. And then whenever John does decide to officially ride off into the sunset, then she would be already in place. That's not a problem.
Great. Okay, and anyways, then I was saying that our next scheduled meeting is January 2nd, which is the day after our first day back for a lot of folks. And wanted to see if there was interest or energy in postponing that 1 week to give folks a better chance to be grounded.
Good idea.
And so with that, I saw lots of yeses and nods. So Judy, it sounds like the next meeting will be
January 8th.
January 8th.
Okay.
I
Validate.
already had that on my calendar, so we must have talked about that.
And we may have, that piece. And also, Bill, that you joined late, the other thing that got emailed out was the draft advisory committee report that is due to the legislation. Judy sent that out at 10:08 this morning, and there was just adding Marina's reference to it and some involvement, I think, was our main feedback, and correcting the membership. Just for your information. And with that, thank you, everybody. And we can let people enjoy the rest of their day and enjoy the fall.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
See you in January.
All right.
Bye.